and welcome to another live. Good to be back. Thank you for joining me. Today, I wanted to come back to a topic that I was talking about last week with Tetsu and Uta, which was about raising multilingual children. And there was quite a big response and a lot of questions about how that works and what my experience has been raising a multilingual child. And so I want to take the time to answer questions that you may have and see if I can share some of my experience and answer things that are particular to you so that you can make these judgments and decisions yourselves as well for raising a child with more than one language. Now, just for those who don't know, I have been raising my daughter with 5 languages. So we spoke English, French, and Macedonian from day one, from hospital, basically, before she was even born, speaking from within the womb. So I would sing songs in French and English and Macedonian while she was still in the womb, and we'd speak in Macedonian as well. So she was used to the sounds of those languages before she was born. And then we got to the age of 1 year and she was already speaking, saying things in all 3 languages. In fact, she could make simple 3-word sentences in all 3. And because the health visitor thought that she was doing particularly well just in English, and was surprised when we said that we had an extra 2 languages that she was doing the same thing in, we decided that it was probably right to just add a couple of other languages and see how she did, because she could clearly cope with it. And there are plenty of examples of people around the world who speak 4 or 5 languages from a very young age and cope just fine. And in fact, the limits really are time and energy or resources to be able to do this kind of thing. And as that wasn't our issue, because obviously I can speak other languages to a level where I could raise a child, we sat down and we decided that we'd look at research into what we'd need to do as a bare minimum to introduce other languages. And so we decided on playtime outside the house for an hour for a new language. We couldn't decide on whether or not to do German or Spanish, so we did both. And I would take her outside to play in German and in Spanish every day. And I would do that, and then at home speak English and French until she got to 1.5 years old. And then I switched to just speaking French at home and no English. And then English was the language that was spoken in groups outside the house with family and with other friends. And then Macedonian was the language of the family. So my wife and I spoke only Macedonian, and my wife spoke only Macedonian to our daughter. And so that's kind of, in a nutshell, how things worked. And clearly, she's a teenager now, so she's been using these languages, understands these languages, and has been going through school, and so now other subjects come into play. So she's interested in other things, not just languages, but she likes other subjects. So I've always had the philosophy generally, I have this in life, that trying to make other people like you is not the greatest of ideas. And particularly when it comes to children, I'm very much of the opinion that it should be fun, it should be natural, it shouldn't be something that would stress or be a trauma for the child. So it's always been a fun thing that we just do certain activities in different languages and mix the activities around, obviously, so that there was a mixture of language for different subject areas. But it was never my intention to replicate the entire school learning experience in all 5 languages. I think it's not necessarily something we have to do. It's not essential to do that. The reason I think that is because I didn't speak some of the languages I use on a daily basis for work and have worked in and through and studied in and through I didn't speak them until I was an adult, and so I couldn't possibly put this sort of idea onto my daughter that she would have to do something that I didn't do myself, and have not really suffered as a consequence from not doing that. So that's kind of where we are with it. But what I would like to do is maybe I'm happy to start taking questions as soon as you have them. But I do want to set the scene a little bit with some ground rules that I think are important. Now, it depends which languages you're coming from and where you're living, and there are many, many factors. And this is why I think there's no blanket answer to everyone and every family and every child for this kind of question about how to raise a child. There are some basic foundations that need to be laid and set from the get-go. And the first major one is that the parents both understand and agree what's going to happen. And it sounds very basic, um, but it's actually a lot more in depth than it might first appear. Um, so we plan things before we have children, and we think that we know how we're going to feel and what we're going to feel, but our bodies change, our hormones change, um, our responses to having a baby are not predictable. Um, some people may find that they were lucky and that they had a very good idea of what it was going to be like, and that was how it was. And if that's you, fantastic. Many of us are actually quite surprised at how we feel and react, and what it changes in us, and um, how the dynamics of the family relationships that we see around the world change. And that's not just for the immediate family, the parents and the child, but also for the extended family and friends. There are changes that take place that we just don't know, and so it's good to be open and to talk about these kinds of things. The next thing is to decide the languages, obviously, that you're going to speak. Now, there are certain ways of doing this with raising children in different languages. Um, there is the one parent, one child. So you have a person attached to a language type method, which obviously does what it says on the tin, really. One person speaks a language, and they speak that language to the child. Another person speaks another language, and they speak that language to the child. And the child speaks both languages, in theory. And then, or if there's an outside community language, then they may learn that language, but then they may retain the either the one language that both parents speak or the two languages both parents speak, and then the external language too. That's another way of having it, that you just go to school not knowing the outside language maybe, or knowing only a bit, and then you go to school and you speak the three languages or two languages or however many languages it is. Now, one thing I would say when you have that type of discussion with a partner about raising a child with more than one language is whether or not you both understand, but all of the languages involved in this process, because sometimes this can be a challenge, because a child is always going to go for the easiest route to communication. So if that is one particular word that they find easier to say and comes to their mind very quickly, the child's not going to sit there and think, oh, which language do I choose? Sometimes you'll get a flurry of words that cross over languages. And so if you don't understand certain things, it can be a little bit confusing. But that's actually the smaller issue at play. The bigger one, I think, that I've noticed with families where they raise children with different languages has been when one parent doesn't speak the language of the other parent or caregiver, and they feel they feel excluded, or that there's something secret. And this is where I talk about how our emotions and our own personality adapts to a new environment, a new reality of having a child. We just don't always know how to predict that kind of reaction, but it's a reaction that happens, and it's something that we definitely need to discuss. And so the things that we can do to combat that are deciding to learn the language and be involved and have an active role in that. The other thing that to do as well is to recognize that if you are in a country or if you speak a language that is particularly dominant, like English is a fantastic example. So let's pretend that my wife and I didn't speak Macedonian, we spoke English. How much harder do you think it would be to have our child speak Macedonian if we just spoke English at home and English is basically everywhere, and then Macedonian will a child would in the United Kingdom, for example, um, would find it extremely challenging then to pick Macedonian as the language to speak because they're not hearing it enough around. They're only hearing it from one parent, and then they're hearing that same parent speak the language that everyone around them is speaking as well. So the child, as I said before, will very often choose the path of least resistance and go for the language that everybody understands. So this is also another conversation that needs to take place where the balance of power is, how we address that and how we tackle that within the family unit and then also with the child to encourage and to be positive about the different languages that are being used. There are definitely strategies here that we have to take on board. So one thing is to not label the language by its name. So it would be called, for example, in our experience in our family, we didn't call the languages English, French, or Macedonian. We just said, how would Daddy say it? And how would Mummy say it? And that was it. So it was Mummy's language and Daddy's language for many, many years until she was told from external sources that the languages had names and put the two together. But that came much later. And there's a good reason for doing that, in that a child finds it harder to actually reject a language if it's called mummy's language or daddy's language or whatever names you choose for yourself as a parent. Whereas it's easier to reject an object like an apple, broccoli, French, because it doesn't really have the same emotional attachment to it for the child in most circumstances. So it's quite easy for the child to say, okay, no, I don't want to speak this. I don't like broccoli. I don't like French. And therefore, I won't eat broccoli and I won't speak French. So as soon as you ask to speak French, then they'll say no. And so yeah, that's one basic rule that I've always used. The other thing that I would say that you need to also take into account is what kind of resources you have to support the learning of the other languages. You know, have you got songs? Have you got songs are good? Have you got programs that you can watch? Have you got books that you can read? Have you got groups that you can form if they don't exist already? Could you form groups, other people in the community who speak these languages that you can, so that the child sees that this is a real working language that exists? I remember once I heard this story about somebody trying to raise a child with Klingon, and I think they got to maybe the age of 3 or 4, and the child very quickly realized that no one else spoke Klingon around them at all, and so point blank refused to speak Klingon. If children are very clever in that way, and they, as I said, the path of least resistance means that they will make decisions and refuse to speak a language because they perceive that it's actually not needed or useful, or it's not in the real world, or their real world, should I say. So children don't go at this with the same mindset that we do as adults. As adults, we think, oh, isn't it great that we speak another language? Isn't it great that we do this or that? Or imagine the career prospects. Or we have all these very kind of etherical ideas as adults as to what it means to speak a language. Reconnecting, even things like reconnecting with your past and things like that. These are all great things for us as adults and can motivate us. But for children, I mean, they're learning about the world, and they're trying to explore the world, and not just the world, but also their internal being, and they're trying to express many emotions, and they're feeling extremely frustrated. And if we're trying to make them learn to deal with all of those emotions in different languages, and they can't find the words. It's deeply frustrating. So this is one of the reasons why children will just go for the path of least resistance, because they just want to get their point across. They're not in it with the same reasoning as an adult. So if they don't see the why very quickly and understand that there is a real need for this language, they are going to reject it. Many of them, not all of them, there are different personalities out there, which is why I say each case is different, but they will very often say no. They'll go for the one that they find the easiest, the one that they find that they hear the most, that they find. I mean, for example, within our family unit, my daughter spoke to me only in Macedonian for maybe. I mean, she did say the things in other languages, but for her default communication with me, it would be in Macedonian for the first 3 years of her life, and that was because that's what she heard most at home. And it was I was going out and playing, and we were playing, but whenever we went shopping or wherever we sat down for food or anything we did, and we spoke my wife and I spoke Macedonian. So for her, it was the most normal thing to speak Macedonian, and but that changed when she was about 3, and she realized that I was speaking these other languages, and she was using them with me as well. Obviously, from time to time, it wasn't that she just spoke Macedonian, but her default would always, if that makes sense, there's a kind of a default language that children will go to, and her default language is Macedonian. So that also changes as children get older. But as I say, people, when we're doing this, we need to be very conscious of showing children this very tangible need for the language, not that. And as soon as children know that the other language can be used very easily, um, they will often just opt for that easier option. Now, that's not to say that if you are the parent that speaks a language that could be rejected, or for example, if you are a Finnish speaker married to a Brit or another nationality, and you're living in the UK or in the United States, and most of the time people are speaking English around you, but you're the one speaking the language that's less heard. Um, whilst it is not great for you to be speaking and using the dominant language in in your area, in your community, um, with your partner and your child all the time, um, it's also not a great idea to pretend that you can't speak it or understand it, because um, pretending you can't understand a language that clearly the child will learn that you can understand, um, it doesn't really do you any favors when it comes to the credibility. And when the child realizes, it could actually just add to the problem of rejecting your language. So often what I find is you add to, so the child maybe says something in um, the other parent's language, or the language of the community that you also understand. And what you do is you just add to it by, you say, yes, that's right, in your own language, obviously. Yes, and of course, this, and then you add to it. You make it a positive, you acknowledge what they've said, you react positively, and then you carry on in your own language, and bring it back to your own language. The same thing goes for if you ask questions of children. It's always best to ask open questions, or questions of choices. So, for example, instead of saying, "Do you want an apple?" I would say, "Do you want an apple or a pear?" And the child then has to say one or the other. There's not a yes or a no. It's they've got to repeat a word. Do you want to swim or go for a walk first? So all of these things that you have, the child has choices and things to repeat back. Children, when they're babies and we're playing with them, we also need to make sure that the language is made real for them in their world. So if you're giving your child something, you need to talk and use prompts. So for example, a pen. I mean, it could be a ball, it could be whatever you want, but I'm going to use a pen because I've got this on my desk. So for example, I'll say, here's the pen. And then, what you say thank you, or whatever you want to say. Ta, we say ta when they're very small, but say thank you, and they take it, and then you can play with colors of pen. So you can say this is one's black, and they say this is a black pen, and maybe you have a red pen or a green pen, and you hold them all, and you say which pen do you want, the black pen, the red pen, or the green pen, and the child then has to decide. And that's when, first of all, you as a parent, you check they understand what you're saying, and you give them a preference, and you're also giving them this choice, and it's very interactive, and it's their real world, so they get what you're doing. So things that I would do with my daughter would be, I bought lots and lots of little toys, teddies, and they were all different animals. So I showed her what they were called in all of the languages, and so to test that she could understand, I would say, give me the lion, give me the giraffe, where's the hippopotamus, where's the hippo, and she would pick them out and give them to me. And these are the kinds of things that you do, talking through your routine as well with the child, making sure that you make everything interactive, whether that's getting dressed in the morning, cleaning teeth, um, having a bath, changing nappies. Talk through what you're doing. I'm just going to lift your legs, I'm going to change your nappy, just going to wash your face, just going to comb your hair, brush the hair. So here's the brush, let's brush your hair. And all of these things that just they're part of the child's world. These are the types of things that make the language real and tangible for the child. And so doing that in the different languages is really, really important, because they need to be very confident with those kinds of things that you're saying. And it's good to keep your language normal, as well, sort of not making it too babyish or ungrammatical. So I would just speak as I'm speaking now, but in a very nice way, because it's a child. You're not going to be, kind of really fast or anything, but in a very nice, calm way, just speaking in English, French, Spanish, German, and then my wife was in Macedonian as well. So we would speak in that way, and sing songs and do all these things, and make the languages tangible. And so that's basically how we agreed to do it, and that's how it worked. And what surprised me the most is, after just a couple of months, even with an hour a day of play in German and Spanish, even though her reproduction of the languages wasn't as strong as English, French, and Macedonian, um, there were certain words that she preferred in those languages over the other three from home, and that was something that really surprised me quite a lot. But it stood her in good stead for being able to have sort of the grammar and the base vocabulary really entrenched in her mind. And so even when she's heard other languages from the same language families, from Slavic, Romance, and Germanic language families, she's been able to pick out meaning, which is always, I mean, it makes sense, right? But it's always surprised me. But she has, over the years, she's heard languages like Danish, Icelandic, Dutch, Portuguese, Italian, Serbian, Bulgarian. What else? She said some Russian, and then other languages that are not related, are like Albanian and Turkish and things, and Greek. But then she's been able to pick out words from these. So it's quite interesting when you sort of get to it. So she'll understand certain things, and it's funny when a child then realizes actually they're speaking a different language. The reactions are quite funny. So yeah, you'll get these. You'll get things, for example, in some languages that are the same, and then other things that are very different. So, like a very good example, when we were in Sofia, um, an old lady approached us and said to my daughter, "Koliko godinimaš?" How old are you? And that's pretty much almost the same as we say in Macedonian. So it was very easy for her to understand, and she was like, "Tri." um, but then she said, "Kak skazvaš?" which means in Bulgarian, "What's your name?" But that is nowhere near like Macedonian. And so she looked at me and she went, "I don't understand what she's saying. What she's saying." And so I just I translated it, and she just replied, which was super cute. But didn't it's interesting how they pick up on certain things and then expand it. And the ears definitely, I think, with these different languages, definitely does help to really raise their awareness of other languages and how they work. Anyway, I think I've probably spoken enough and given you enough of an introduction. It's been 25 minutes of me talking, but I thought it was important to go through the background again in this video for anybody watching for the first time. And I'm just going to look at the questions that are here now. And I'm going to see if I can help with any questions that you might have. Ok. Para de algumas lives recentemente. Olá, Svetlana. Então, não faz mal. Pode também ver no YouTube, se você quiser. You see, I am yet to have children, but I can see this to be very organized. Yeah, I'm sure you will when you know, if you decide to have children. It's definitely something that requires long conversations and a good amount of thought. So I'm working through the YouTube questions first, and I'll come back to Instagram. I wish I could have raised my son multilingual, but I didn't really start learning my other languages until he was a teenager, so not much of an opportunity. Yeah, Tiffany, I've heard that as well before. I've actually met people as well who have had family and they haven't spoken in the family language, and there are regrets. But you know what? Look, I mean, there are people out there that think, you know, the be all and end all is raising a child with multiple languages. Look, it's a lovely thing to do, particularly if you have other languages in the family, and it makes a lot of sense. I wasn't raised with multiple languages, and it's not really stopped me. You know, I had languages from a young age, but I wasn't raised multilingually, and so I can't pretend that it's absolutely necessary in life to really enjoy languages to the degree I enjoy them. Obviously, there are some nice shortcuts that people get when they just have the words spoken at them when they're very young, but people who are raised with more than one language don't necessarily go into it, and people who are raised with one language may go into it, but also may lead very fulfilling lives just like that. And so I'm not that polyglot. I'm not that language learner that thinks that we all necessarily have to learn languages. I think we all would benefit from learning a language because it gives us a lot more than just the linguistic ability. I think it gives us a different view on life, a lot more understanding for what it's like to speak another language, and understanding therefore for our other fellow humans. And also it can give us insight into our own language. And so I definitely encourage people to learn languages, but I'm definitely not on the side of we all have to. I absolutely respect anyone who makes whatever decision, and so whilst I understand that you might feel some regret for that for your son, I would say if he's happy and he's getting on okay and he's doing things he enjoys, it's not necessarily the be all and end all. And if he wants to come to it, he's got a great mum to support him. So yeah. I'm sure you're a fantastic support. So here we go. Let me see. When they are teenagers, they are hard. Yeah, teenagers are their own thing. Exactly. My wife and I are raising 2 children so far in Irish. Fantastic. Our method is very simple. We speak Irish to our children. We have only ever spoken in Irish to them. They get about 30 minutes twice or 3 times. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. If you're speaking Irish at home, then that will just be the default language usually. And a lot of people in Wales do the same thing. They just speak Welsh at home, and the children don't speak English until they go to school or nursery or school. Not understanding the language of your partner can lead to a lot of unnecessary misunderstandings. So as well as parenting, etc. Absolutely, Lena. Yeah. It is really important that we at least talk and discuss how we bridge that gap for understanding the language of our partner. I very much agree with that. They have Irish TV, and we play lots of games, puzzles, and bedtime stories in Irish, and can speak English, but we never have spoken English directly to them, or them to us if we hear English. That's good. We normally laugh it off, saying we speak Irish in this family, and of course, they might use an English word, but if they only know it's in English, then we'll make an effort to look it up in Irish. Yeah, fantastic. I mean, this is the thing, right? It's also when you're talking about particularly Indigenous languages and Indigenous languages that are spoken in a context of a language like English around them, or Spanish as well, or French, or whichever language it is. Often the colonial languages that this happens in, but there can be other examples too. There is a kind of a domination, a sort of a dominant default language, right? Especially for some ideas and things. I mean, let's take English for an example, because that's the language I'm speaking now, and also it's the language you're talking about too, John. English is a very rich language in terms of vocabulary, expressions. It moves very quickly, and there isn't as much debate as there is in a number of other language communities to decide which word we should use for a certain thing. I mean, French has that quite a lot more, even though it is a similar type of language like English, but English doesn't have that, so it tends to be quite dynamic in that way. And the communities tend to need to agree sometimes on certain ways to express things for other languages. So if you need to look up, I think it's not necessarily a bad thing to have your child think, okay, well, we need to learn how to express this properly. It's actually quite a nice habit to get into, having a child understand that we look in dictionaries and we don't always know everything, and it's not a bad example to set either. I think it's quite good that you show that you look for information and you want to get it right, and we accept that we don't know everything in the world, and not just for language but for so many things. I mean, we can't know everything, and Google doesn't always give us the right answer. So looking up things, I think, is really positive. Sounds like you're doing a great job. Harriet, my children are 2 and 4 years old, and yet they say to speak. Okay, and are yet to say speak any Greek, maybe with the exception and meaning of not or no. So Craig, where are you living, and who's speaking Greek at home? And because it's quite normal that children up to the age of 3 or maybe even 4 will not say very much in a language or any language when they're being raised multilingually. That's something that we read, and we were quite surprised when our daughter said things at the age of 1, because we were expecting her to speak late, if I'm honest. So yeah, I mean, the research seems to indicate that you can end up not speaking or not saying very much until the age of 3. The way to maybe start encouraging the usage of Greek would be using that technique that I mentioned before, of giving choices in Greek. So I would do that. I would give choices, so that they have to say a word of what they want, and things that they want to play with, like toys or foods or things like that, so that you're saying the words, and then they have to say the word, or at least try to, and they're not just saying no. So yes, these questions are always important. Makes sense to take the least resistance away, make it fun, and talk about what they like. Or what I'm talking about, I don't even know this. Oh dear. Well, you can talk about it. You don't have to have children to talk about it and to have an interest in it. Look, I think there are lots of things as well that are applicable to children learning languages and adults learning languages. Lots of things work for generally in language learning. So it's fine to pitch in with an opinion and talk. Hi Richard. Okay, I'm not sure if you addressed this already. I popped in 10 minutes late. Okay, may have done. Michael, let me see. Have you incorporated literacy into your passing of these languages to your daughter? If so, when? So I didn't. In terms of literacy, I left that for when she started school with her peers and to learn as they did. And so she started learning to read and write in French first because she was in a French kindergarten. And then she started first year of primary school in English, and then was doing things in English. But I didn't, and she had Macedonian as well as a first language, so she had some lessons like that. But it wasn't anything that we forced to do at home. We were for us, we took the approach of, as long as she is literate in one language, the concept and the idea of reading tends to basically be this, that if you can read in a language, you understand the concept and the idea of reading, then doing that in other languages, particularly in languages like Spanish and German, where, I mean, reading is not a particular struggle. If you know the letters and the alphabet and the sounds, then you can read what's on a page in Spanish and German. French can be a little bit trickier because you've got these sounds, these letters that you don't pronounce very often, and like English is a nightmare for pronunciation and spelling, which is why we have these spelling tests and competitions like for years and years. And the Macedonian is pretty easy when it comes to spelling because you learn the alphabet and you basically just write. I mean, it's probably one of the, again, like Spanish, one of the easier languages to read and write for a child because it maps on perfectly with the alphabet. We didn't worry too much about her having to read so many things in all of the languages, just because as soon as a child is literate in a language, the whole concept behind the idea of literacy is there. And so all you're then doing is adapting that awareness and skill and knowledge to other languages. But the hard thing of putting things together and understanding how things go together and the mapping of different words and sounds and letters has been done once and can then be duplicated in other languages. So we went on that principle, and it's been fine. I yeah, I think that as children mature, they've got many other things that they have to develop as well. So as long as they're literate in the language, well developed in their literary skills in one language, and the language that they're being educated in, or the languages they're being educated in, I think then that allows them to focus more on other subjects as well, which are also important, like science and maths and history and geography and whatever else that comes up. And then the other languages that they speak, then if they decide that they want to use them for professional reasons or to live in the country or whatever they want, then they can always go back and brush up on some of those skills and learn some of the terminology. My philosophy is there very much to get the grammatical understanding in the brain, and then you can develop the more of the skills later. That's just the way I've done it, so that it's less stressful and less intensive or intense for our daughter. So that's kind of where I've come from. But yes, she can write. She studied all 5 languages. In fact, I mean, she's done exams in French, Spanish, and German. And in Macedonia, she hasn't done any exams, but she was taught the language as a first language as well, and had to read and write it. But yeah, at home we didn't really. We only worked on the English actually when it came to spelling, because that one is a nightmare for spelling. So yeah, we use coloured chalk to draw shapes and numbers on the ground. This shape over there, this number over there. That's a nice thing, yeah. And then You can hop. Yeah, okay. Hop to the red square. Yeah, that's a really nice idea, John. I like that idea. Appreciate speech about diversity of languages around children has helped us to create curiosity to recognize children's languages that we encounter and see their relevance as ways to connect. Yep, Liana, absolutely. Speaking about it in an open way is really good. I mean, we talk about that kind of thing a lot, and we had an Italian family that lived in near us, and I was hanging around with them a lot for maybe a good 4 years. I had very close contact with his family, and we used to go round as a family, and we'd make pizza together. We'd just chat, and all of this was in Italian. So my daughter heard Italian for like 4 or 5 years, a lot. And what I did was actually I used to tell her words in Italian to say, "This is how the family says such and such a thing." And slowly but surely, she started to incorporate those Italian words and understand them. And because Italian's also a Latin language, it was fairly easy to make the jump from the knowledge of Spanish and French to Italian. And her ear was attuned quite well, so the parents would speak to her directly in Italian, and she couldn't always respond in Italian, but she could follow what they were saying and understand it, and responded appropriately. Sometimes she would be able to like show with her hands, or sometimes she'd even say things in Italian, but not as much. But yes, it was quite interesting to see. Let me see. I appreciate that. Thank you. You're very welcome, Tiffany. Bridging that context gap is really important. Would make a great topic for next time. Yeah, the bridging the context gap. Yeah, okay, Craig, I'll take that on board. That might be quite a cool thing to do. Wanted to know your thoughts on Welsh language schools and children from English first language families. Oh, really good question. Is this valuable when the parents can't speak Welsh, or does it create problems for when the children maybe not being fluent in either language? So the children will be fluent in. I mean, you cannot live in the United Kingdom and not be fluent in English. It's just not. It's not going to happen because there are no non-fluent speakers who speak Welsh and don't speak English fluently. That just doesn't exist. So even if people speak just Welsh at home, they still speak English as well. So when it comes to non-Welsh speakers sending their children to school in Welsh, yep, it can be hard for doing homework. There are things that you need to discuss and talk about and agree. This could be an opportunity for you to learn Welsh yourself. If you're living in Wales, I absolutely would encourage anybody living in Wales to learn the language, as people in England expect people to learn English. Yes, I know that there are many people who don't speak Welsh in Wales, and it's not necessarily a big issue in terms of if if you live in a predominantly English speaking area, but still there are difficult facts around why that's the case and what impact that has, particularly in communities. So I would definitely encourage the family to invest in learning Welsh. Learning Welsh is an opportunity for a child to learn how to think and function in another language. So it would help them for not just other languages, but also for other subjects. So the data that I remember seeing many years ago, and as many years ago, was that the Welsh medium schools were actually outperforming the English monolingual schools that just had Welsh as kind of a token second language. And the reason is because children have to adapt their thinking to a different way. They have to. The brain is thinking differently about how to express themselves, and so they were doing better in things like maths as well. So there was a a point in Wales, and I remember this, I think it was in Wrexham, where, or near there, Flint or somewhere around there in North Wales, where actually the Welsh schools were oversubscribed because a lot of English only speaking parents were very clever in recognizing that it was an advantage for their children, and they took advantage of it, and their children were doing a lot better as a result. I mean, I can't see a world in the UK where I mean, where you can't ignore English. I mean, English is just everywhere. It's just, I mean, it's everywhere, and everyone speaks it. And so, I mean, the default language in most places is English, even in Wales, and you know, it's a language that people are quite happy to default to as well. So you're going to see it all over the place. There's a lot more media, a lot more songs, a lot more everything in English. It's just a huge language. So no, I don't think it will be a problem for the English. And as term into fluency, yeah, I mean they're going to be, I mean fluency and be able to work in language, they're going to be able to do that anyway. Now there are people that worry about, you know, how well you speak a language, right? And it's a relevant and fair question to have. So let's just talk a little bit about that while we're talking about fluency and how well people speak languages. There are monolinguals who find it difficult to write and read the standard language accurately. And that's without having another language. They just do. Because not everyone's the same. We have people who are good at English, let's say monolinguals, right? Monolingual English speakers. We have people that are that are good at English, and we have people that are not so good at English because maybe their talents or their natural motivations, their interests lie elsewhere. They may be more drawn to other subjects, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's no judgment call on that. But we do have to acknowledge that that is the case, because if we don't, then we're living in La La Land. I mean, like it's like pretending, like, you know, we watch American Idol or, you know, The Voice or whatever those programs are called, and everyone goes on thinking they can sing, but of course not everyone sings to the same level. And some people are naturally very, very good and sing beautifully. Other people believe that they're good at it and they're not. Now, when it comes down to it, the people that can't sing will have other things that they can do well, or other things that they're more interested in, and therefore there's kind of a compensation, right? The other singers who sing really well may not be as good at any of the other things that the people who can't sing as well. And so it is with language. I mean, there are people who will naturally be able to express themselves freely and with a wide and deep range of vocabulary, because it's just there. They're well read. They're very good at spelling. They understand the grammar. They understand how to switch between different genres in English, you know, how they speak it and then how they present it in writing. And there is people who just naturally do that, or are naturally interested in doing that, and therefore focus their attention and energy more on those things. So once we've acknowledged that happens in one language, by adding another language, you're not changing that. All you're doing is adding another language. Like, for example, if you say, let's add an instrument, or let's add history, or let's add football, or let's add whatever, it doesn't change the other thing necessarily. It might enhance it, if anything, but it's not necessarily going to change it in itself. The learning of more than one language would more likely enhance the other language, because you're understanding how two different grammars work. And to do that, you have to make comparisons of vocabulary and of grammar and of expression, and how one language will do things and another one will do things. And so it makes you take a more analytical approach of the language or languages that you're using. So I'm going to sort of put it out there that potentially actually it would be better for most people to have them. Of course, there are going to be people who confuse things, but they would probably be the same people who would get tongue-tied in one language if they had one language. Just to sort of say, there are children who are born with varying conditions as well, and are raised bilingually, um, and and so if you are born with a condition that people sometimes say that you need additional attention at school to be able to get through certain tasks or learning exercises. Often these children will perform the same way but with more than one language and also become bilingual, multilingual. And that's also very, very interesting to see. In fact, we had this as a discussion at the Polyglot Conference in Reykjavik and also at the language event in Edinburgh in 2020, where we had researchers looking into autism and multilingualism come and talk on their research. And in fact, yeah, it doesn't help to just speak one language. There's sort of what they've seen. So these kinds of things of is it something that we should worry about? The education is, I mean, they can learn words. We're talking about words, right? We're not talking about, a few extra words is not going to hurt them. Definitely, it's going to enrich their lives. But yeah, it's a good question, and I really appreciate you asking that. Actually, but particularly about Wales, I have met parents who did do exactly what you said. They sent their children to a Welsh medium school and didn't speak Welsh, and then they started learning it themselves, and also found it extremely fruitful. So, yeah, I would encourage anyone in that position, whether that's in Ireland or in the Isle of Man or in Wales or in Scotland, where you have those options. In Cornwall, hopefully at some point there will be that option as well to have your child going through an education system fully in Cornish. At the moment, I think it's only bits and bobs, but even bits and bobs is better than nothing. So I would definitely encourage your child to learn whichever language it is. Yeah, because you don't know what kind of child that's going to. You know what your child's going to do. We don't know what kind of adult they're going to be, and so it's better to not cut off options than cut off options, if that makes sense. Because a child can decide what they want to do with that knowledge later. But if they haven't got the knowledge, they can't make that decision. It's been made for them. There we go. That's my my thought on it anyway. Okay. Do you have any tips on how to support children learn to write and read in the minority language? Would you wait until they learn it to do their stronger language, or do the same time or earlier? Depends what you want to do and what the language is, Lena. I didn't necessarily make our daughter learn to read and write in multiple languages. So other people would. I didn't, but I was very happy for literacy to happen in one language and then for that to be a translated skill into other languages. Okay, I'm in England. Okay, Craig, so I'm in England. My wife speaks 50-50 at home. I use single words in Greek and the equivalent word in English. Certainly understand Greek. I guess they are still at that early stage. Appreciate. Yeah, Craig, if they are at that early stage, also if your wife is speaking 50-50, then you're in that category of the children are starting to understand that English can just be used. And so it may be a bit more of a battle. I hope it's an easy battle for you, but slowly, surely, and positively is the kind of the answer. And being as positive as you possibly can. It's easy for me to say, but I know it's not as easy to do in every case. So yeah, I would encourage your wife to only be speaking Greek though, because speaking 50-50 is really sowing the seeds for your children to understand Mum also speaks English, so why bother with this Greek thing? It's unfortunately, it's a tough one. It's tough. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. It's tough, but absolutely, they will understand that very quickly. And in fact, Alex Rawlings talks about that with his experience with Greek in London. That when he was very young, he openly says he didn't see the point of it, so he didn't speak it. And it wasn't until he went to Greece and was playing with children that he started using Greek because they didn't speak English. So yeah. So nice to hear that there are fathers that will spend an hour a day playing with their kids. My husband doesn't do that much in a week. Oh wow, I'm so sorry, Inga. Yeah, for me it was extremely important. I was very much if I'm having a child, I'm having a child, and so yeah, I mean it wasn't an hour a day. It was way more. I mean, I was with her a lot. So it was an hour a day for German, an hour a day for Spanish, and then all the normal stuff we did in French and English, and so it was hours and hours a day. Although on the other side of the coin, Inga, I had zero conversation. All I could talk about was nappies and children and where my daughter's development was. So I was really I bored myself with my own conversation. But no, I know what you mean, and I'm sorry that's not your experience. But you know, every family's different, okay, and different work requirements, different work challenges. Things are always different. So I have a lot of understanding that not everyone's got the same dynamic that I had. I was lucky in that I worked from home and I managed. While my daughter was very young, when she was a baby, I used to work before she woke up in the morning, and then when she went to sleep, and then work as well during her nap time during the day. So I was able to do quite a lot of did all my work that way, and I worked 7 days a week to make up the full time hours, but had the time when she was awake with her. And so um, yeah, it was. And then obviously with my wife, we could sort of we could manage it that way. But yeah, that's how it was for us. But not everyone's been fortunate as I have to be in that position. So I do recognise that I was fortunate to have that work opportunity. Um, I didn't do any language study, by the way, while my daughter was in the first 3 years. Actually, the second year I did BSL. I went to a British Sign Language class once a week for a year, and that was it. But otherwise, I did no language study in those 3 years. I just concentrated on my daughter and gave up language study pretty much for 3 years. Uh, so yeah, it was there were sacrifices. I mean, it wasn't. I couldn't do everything. Um, Adding to the earlier question, I guess I'm mostly referring to languages that are not usually taught at school. So the responsibility of passing on language is with the family. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So if it's a language like that you're just with the family, then making sure you've got the resources at home. I think allowing your child to learn the language that they're learning at school, to read and feel confident reading, is good first, because they need to get over that frustration. Sometimes it can be just an additional frustration if they've not done that once, and then they're trying to do it again and again and again and again before they've got the first one down. Um, Look, if they're speaking it and they understand it, that's the really important thing. They can learn to read it and write it later. I, I, I didn't know a word of Macedonian until I was 27, and I function perfectly fine in the language, and I read and write it perfectly fine. And um, so as I say, it's really not the big issue I think we think it is. And kids have time; they're kids. Um, so picking out books, and maybe once they feel more confident with the one language, then start looking at the other language at home. That's kind of where I would be with it, because especially if it's a different script, it can be challenging, and it can also be quite confusing. So, let me give you an example with Macedonian and English, for example. So if I write, oh dearie me, so if I write this letter here, it's probably going to show up the opposite way around now, right? I'm just going to write it on the page. Hopefully it appears the right way around. If it doesn't, let me know. But anyway, it should be P in English. But obviously that's R in Macedonian. It's a Cyrillic R. But so this is quite confusing in the beginning for children. These kinds of things that look the same but are not, or don't sound quite right. So yeah, I mean, it can get a bit weird. So let them learn one system first, and then you can easily transfer the skill. My husband is French, Hungarian, I'm Norwegian, and the kids know all three languages plus English, which they've picked up on their own. Sounds like you've done a good job then, Inga. I mean, if your husband speaks French and Hungarian and they speak those as well as your Norwegian and English, then it sounds like you've done perfectly well, in spite of him not having that much time free to spend. So good on you. I've got a question, and others in the Conlang community are discussing at times, that I'd like to turn to you. What are your thoughts on teaching children Conlangs, auxiliary language challenges, pros, cons? I've met people who have learnt them from childhood, especially Esperanto. And look, let's be frank, children are going to learn in school mostly because there are not that many schools, that they're not going to use them very often. So they are going to understand that quite quickly. But if you're speaking them at home and then they go on those camps and different courses and things, why not? I mean, it makes it real, right, for the kid. There's no reason why it can't be a real language for them. So conlang or not, it's another language. It's another way of thinking. It's another grammar, and you know the sort of the experiments that they did in the schools in London with the children learning Esperanto and then French, and for 2 years, like 1 year Esperanto, 1 year of French, and then the other group's doing just 2 years of French, and then the Esperanto group outperforming the ones that just did French. They're super interesting to see. So why not? Why not? The challenges are those though, that they're not spoken in society, and also you know, sort of where they grow up. It's very unlikely that they're going to speak the language very often, if it's a conlang. But and the other thing actually with that, particularly with conlangs, is that you're less likely to be able to use them in like shops and things, and like buying tickets. And whereas with a lot of other languages, even even indigenous languages, sometimes you'll be able to use in those kinds of contexts. Where with Esperanto, unless you go to like a camp where they've got a shop set up at the camp or at the group, you're less likely to be able to use that kind of thing, right? In a shop, in a like a regular shop that you go into. But yeah, those kinds of issues you're going to face. But I think people that grow up with them, and they grow up perfectly fine. I mean, I think interlingua maybe might be one of the exceptions in that I don't believe it was created to be somebody's first language. It was created to be an interlingua language that you can learn easily to communicate with lots of people who speak Latin languages and English. But yeah. Hola, estoy aprendiendo inglés. ¿Algún consejo? Pues hablar. Lo que pasa es que estoy hablando como para los niños, ¿no? Ahora mismo, a ver si puedo volver a este tema otro día, porque como que estoy hablando sobre la enseñanza de niños, es que es mejor continuar con esto ahora y luego pues podemos volver a este tema, ¿vale? English, English or inglés? I don't know what you mean. English. What English? Like you're trying to do the Português Portugal English. You inglês for Brazil. Thanks, Richard. Great to get your thoughts on it. I used to teach in an English medium school in Wales, hence the questions. Great question, though. Great question. Richard, what do you recommend to increase the vocabulary in general terms? For children, lots of different topics, going out to different places, making sure that you make it interesting, like going to parks, going to zoos, going to museums, going to the theatre, the cinema, lots of things where you can see lots of different situations and scenarios, taking kids on different trips and holidays, and activities and things, that's a good way to increase the language, the language that they will come into contact with. Indigenous languages are just so gratifying to learn, and so as well. Yeah, they are indeed, Israel. I agree. I can speak English with other friends from the USA, and I also understand them quite well. And I understand same, but sometimes I feel like I'm constantly using the same words. Yep. Then, if you feel that way, that's a very, very normal feeling for many learners, and the way to get over that is to speak to different people about different topics, and to read about different, and listen about or around different topics, then start to tease out words to express yourself in a more precise way about certain things, and then use those words. So yeah, that's what I would do. And then you start to use words, and it feels like your vocabulary starts to expand. Bonsoir, Richard. Bonsoir. Saludos desde Cancún. Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Todo bien, Gabriela? ¡Uy! ¿Qué tal? ¿Estás bien? A ver si nos vemos en México, ¿eh? ¿Vais a venir? Makes sense. Thanks, Richard. Jaya Kadelfos mu είναι δωτόρα. Αυτό ακούσε περισσότερα μετά. Ναι, εντάξει. Ευχαριστώ. Γεια σας. Από τα Σκόπια. Ναι, θα δούμε με τα ελληνικά, νομίζω. Είναι καλύτερα να μιλήσει μόνο να μιλάει μόνο στα ελληνικά στο σπίτι. Αυτό είναι πάρα πολύ σημαντικό για τα παιδιά, νομίζω. Και ήταν έτσι για εμένα στη Μεγάλη Βρετανία. Ήμουν εκεί με τη γυναίκα μου 3 χρόνια. Ναι, εκεί στο Chester. Και μιλήσαμε μόνο στα μακεδονικά στο σπίτι. Και μετά στη πόλη ήταν μόνο στα αγγλικά και με εμένα στα γαλλικά. Και έτσι ήταν πάρα πολύ εύκολο για εμένα να το κάνω. Και μετά ήταν λίγο ενδιαφέρον να ακούω μόνο τα μακεδονικά με εμένα από τη μικρή. Αλλά ναι, ήταν ένα πρόβλημα καλύτερο για εμένα να έχω αυτό το πρόβλημα από ένα πρόβλημα με τα αγγλικά. Γιατί η αγγλική γλώσσα είναι τόσο μεγάλη και τόσο παντού στη Μεγάλη Βρετανία, και αυτό είναι το πρόβλημα με τα αγγλικά. Ξέρεις. Okay. Yeah, I see this as a topic I was waiting for, and I can't motivate my kids to learn Spanish. Andreas, are you speaking to them in Spanish? This is the question. Whenever anyone says I can't motivate them to speak, they may not speak. Some children won't speak it because they've got a dominant language already, and so the choice has been made. But if you continue to speak, it's not easy. It's not easy. But if you continue to speak, and you give choices, and you make it understandable with props and with context, it goes in. It does go in. I think the worst thing to do is to try and get kids to perform. I see that a lot, where they say, just say this or just say that. Then they're like, no, because they find it embarrassing. Children, as they get older, from the age of 7, it gets more difficult because they are more self-aware, self-conscious of who they are, of their peers, their friends, their groups, of how they appear to other people. So it gets more complicated. Yeah. I want to learn multiple languages for fun. Okay. What's the least amount of work? Okay. I'm going to get onto like adult learning maybe on another live, and just focus on the questions about children, because I'm hoping that I've got through as many as I can, but I'm just very, very aware at the moment that I've got nowhere near all of the questions. Okay. Does Macedonian have the same characters or letters? The letters in Greek are Russian. So neither. It's Cyrillic, so it's like Russian in a lot of ways, but there are different. It's a Macedonian Cyrillic. So there are certain words, the letters that we have that don't exist in Russian. So typical ones that you'll see are. Let me just give you a few. I'll give you two. And I'll tell you why I've given you these two. So ke and j. So this j is one of my favorite. It's my favorite letter because most of the Turkish loan words start with this. So I'll give you an example. So, for example, the word for marigold, which is one of my favorite words in Macedonian, is junjule, and junjule also means rugrat in slang, which is quite cool. But we also have a lot of words like this. That these are the Turkish words, but as Greek speakers will know, the same kind of Turkish words have gone into Greek as well. So words like tsanta in Greek for bag, we have as chanta, which that ch exists also in Russian. But yeah, it's Cyrillic, but the Cyrillic script is based off Greek. The brothers that came from Thessaloniki to create the script, yeah, who are Cyril and Methodius, and they are from Thessaloniki. They are from Greece, so they spoke Greek and they used the Greek script, and they based the Cyrillic script off that. Yeah. Let me see. Thank you for your recommendation. Thank you. You're welcome. Eso estamos tratando de hacer si queremos ir. Pero, muy bien, Gabriela. Pues que me gustaría veros. Es que sí, bastante. Okay, I can see. Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Catalano mostly. I'm glad you understood mostly what I said in Greek. Sorry, I was kind of saying it for your Greek family as well, just to kind of be as inclusive as I could. Yeah, but yeah, I'm glad that you could follow mostly as well. Hopefully, I was accurate enough to make myself understood in Greek. Unfortunately, I'm seeing this one in okay, what's this? Shalom? Is it? Hani Ledaber. Okay. Germanit. I'm not quite sure what you're writing here. It's hard for me to read the Hebrew script on the chat because it's small. I'm sorry. I find Hebrew, Arabic, and some of the scripts quite challenging to read because they get so small on these. So I'm scared that I'm going to get them all wrong. But I see that you're saying about German. You want to? Is that what you're talking about? It's okay. Thank you. ¿Crees que el uso de aplicaciones para aprender idiomas para los niños de 15 años? Pues eso sí que. The language is Yiddish. Okay. Okay. Well, I completely messed that up then, didn't I? Feel free to ask again. But if you can write it in Latin letters, that would be easier for me. I can understand Yiddish if it's written in Latin letters. ¿Crees que el uso de aplicaciones será okay. Las aplicaciones para aprender idiomas, sí que si estás hablando y utilizando esto como método para tener interacciones también con los niños, sí que puede ayudar un poco, pero sí. En general no uso tanto aplicaciones, pero sí, puede ser útil también. Pero con los padres. Kannst reden Jiddisch. Er kann nicht, ich kann es nicht sprechen, aber ich kann es verstehen. Ich kann Deutsch. Ja, ich kann Deutsch. Is it Deutsch? That's what you call it, right? Ich kann Deutsch. But I understand. I listen to a lot of Yiddish on TikTok. Actually, I follow Yiddish creators. I like Yiddish a lot. Hi, my friend. Hello, hello, hello. Let me just see. I'm going through the questions now on Instagram as well to see if I've got any questions that I've missed, and then I'm going to have to disappear. Bonjour. Pour enseigner les trois. Ok, top. Futur français. Oh, d'activité. En fait, avec moi, en fait, en ce qui concerne la grammaire d'une langue, moi, je parle la langue avec les enfants. Je sais même pas c'est pas en fait, c'est pas la même chose, d'apprendre une langue à l'école. Si on parle une langue avec un enfant, c'est déjà on utilise la langue. Donc il y a pas de cours, il y a pas de question de comment apprendre la grammaire ou bien les futurs, quoi que ce soit. C'est déjà incorporé dans la langue qu'on utilise pour, communiquer les idées et c'est tout. Donc, c'est ça ce que je fais. Donc c'est déjà un peu difficile de faire de parler de ça, quand je suis en train de parler de ce que je fais à la maison, en fait. Heu, mais, voyons, let me see. Ik meen as je this is een aangelegde gevraagd. Aha, gevraagd, oké. Salut in Romania este foarte bun. Te admir de mulți ani. Oh, no, mersi foarte mult. Felicitate și mult succes. Ah, succes. Foarte mult. Ok. Mersi foarte mult pentru foarte frumoasă. Uh, Asta pentru mine, da. Citesc românește, dar nu este o limbă, că, am vorbit la Chișinău, dar nu este o limbă ce o vorbesc foarte bine acum, pentru că nu am prieteni din România, aici, la Macedonia și, este mai greu să vorbesc bine. Am nevoie de practică în limba română acum. Okay. Let me see if I got any more questions here. Let's see. Ótimo trabalho, na organização da conferência. Obrigado, obrigado. Obrigado. Dobry wieczór, jak se máte? Dobrze, díky. Jak se máte vy? Are you in England now, Macedonia? I'm in Skopje at the moment. Okay. Is the Welsh language difficult? Of all of the Celtic languages, I think Welsh is the easiest Celtic language to learn for somebody who speaks almost any other language. I think it's the easiest one. Macedonian is the easiest Slavic language, and Welsh is the easiest. Well, depends. If you don't speak another Slavic language, Macedonian is the easiest Slavic language, and if you don't speak another Celtic language, Welsh is the easiest Celtic language. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't even need to think about that. Is Scottish Gaelic a compulsory subject in Scottish schools? No, it's not. It's a language that you can learn in Scottish Gaelic communities, but not necessarily. It's not. No, in Wales, you have to learn Welsh either as a first or a second language. But to be honest, it's quite tokenistic in some schools. Whereas an Irish, you have to learn Irish in Ireland, but Scottish Gaelic, no, you don't have to learn it. Depends where you go. You have options to learn it, I think. But yeah. Do you know anything about Tim Donor these days? I've not been in touch with him for a few months, but yeah, maybe hopefully soon again. He's a nice guy. Many of my friends say to me, "We knew better if we just spoke one language." I disagree. Okay. but I have found it challenging, okay, to my word, to communicate, okay, to argue for English, for convincing argument for linguistic diversity that can convince. So yeah, I mean, people talk about this. What's the point? Why don't we just speak a language? Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like saying, why don't we have just vanilla ice cream? And that's it. It's like, okay. No one has to think about what flavor ice cream they take. It's just going to be vanilla from now on. It makes the world more interesting. It helps us understand certain things, concepts, ideas, cultural references better. It helps us understand. Let's just take English, okay? Let's pretend that tomorrow English is the only language that we speak. Great. But where does English come from? English is this language that is made up of a base of Germanic language in its core grammar, and it still is. And we know this because of the verb forms and different things and certain base words, right? That are the same in other Germanic languages. But it's also got this layer, this huge, thick layer of French, particularly French, Norman French, which from Norman French, we've got a lot of words from Latin and Greek. I mean, like many languages in Europe, this isn't just English, this is many languages. I mean, and when I say Greek, I'm not talking about modern Greek, I'm talking about ancient Greek, of course. Um, it's these languages that are no longer spoken as regular everyday languages, Greek and ancient Greek and Latin. We have all these from French, through French, because French was the language of the courts in the United Kingdom. Well, in it wasn't really called the United Kingdom then, but anyway, from the country that's now called the United Kingdom, these languages were used by high society, and French was always an aristocratic and seen as a language of power. And to this day, there are elements of that shine through with French. So if you learn French and German, okay, the languages that are probably most commonly taught, or were previously most commonly taught as modern languages in the UK, what they do is they help you to understand English and where it comes from and the similarities, and gives you a lot more insight into the language. So it enriches your experience of English. So it's kind of like saying not just you only have vanilla ice cream, but you cannot put any sauces on top of it to really just make the flavor more exciting. You just have to enjoy the vanilla. And if you want more vanilla, you just keep asking for more vanilla. And that's basically it. So that's really my thought on why it's not a great idea to just have one language. Also, it's fun. I mean, for the brain, it's really, it's a lot of fun to switch languages and to be able to play with them. I mean, you don't have to have it as a situation where, you use them to exclude people. You can use them just because it's fun to do, and switching is great. So it's good mental exercise, to do it. It's a lot of fun. Okay. So, oh my word, I'm sorry, I can't. I'm just thinking that I'm not going to get through all these questions. I'm just looking at how many there are. Oh my word. I'm going to have to do another talk on whether it's on this or whether it's on something else. I don't know. But please do feel free if you've got more questions about this and about raising children or multilingualism. Put your questions on my YouTube channel is the easiest way to say it, because then I'll read them. I mean, I don't reply to all of the questions on my YouTube channel, but what I do is I read them and I inform choices for future future topics from that. The other thing as well, if you're interested in anything more, is you're very welcome to join me on Patreon, and I can tackle your individual questions in a more comprehensive way. Feel free to join me on either, both, whatever you want to do. And I will look forward to seeing you next week. I've spent an hour and a half nearly, and I will get told off by some of you in the comments for taking so long over a live, but I think we had a lot to talk about. So let's speak next week. Take care and happy language learning. Thank you for joining me. Remember to give a like, give a follow, and share and comment. Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.